Hey everybody, my name is Jim Farmer. I am the festival director of Out on Film, Atlanta's LGBTQ Film Festival. I'm also an arts reporter for Georgia Voice. I am very excited tonight to be talking to Skyler Davenport of the new movie See For Me, which opens in theaters December 7th. It's also on digital and video on demand. In the film, Skyler plays a blonde woman who is house sitting in a secluded mansion when it is invaded by thieves. I saw the film a couple of nights ago. It's very suspenseful, very well done. Skyler, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. I believe you said December 7th. It's January 7th. Not to be we're off to a great start. I'm so sorry to be
No, thank you so much. I had January 7th, December 7th is long gone.
I was going to say, people, too late.
Did I miss it already? So how did this project come up?
Come up for me or come up in general?
I mean, for you.
Yeah, I was going to say, second question I cannot answer. For me, I received a message from production. They said, we understand that you are visually impaired. And if that's actually the case, we'd like to know more and we'd like to have you audition tape for this. So I sent in a tape and 2 months went by and nothing happened. So I was like, all right, I didn't get it, shoot. And then 2 months later, this was before COVID, I went in person for a callback with the director and the casting directors, and they put me on tape and sent the tape to producers. And then I believe there was another tape about 2 months later. So after about 6 months of on and off auditioning, they said, congratulations, we'd like to bring you to Canada to start shooting. So that was how it came across my path.
Congratulations. Now, can you talk a little bit about Sophie? How would you describe Sophie?
Oh, I've constantly been I just love that she was written as so very human.
Yeah.
And, just flawed in the way that a lot of people are, whether we want to admit it or not. And I love that it was she's just, obviously the situation calls for it, but just very sort of survival and instinctualistic. I don't know if that's a word, but it is now. Just very raw and relatable. And I think just enough where you have a little bit of empathy to where in some moments you're like, oh, there's a person under that shell that is trying to now navigate this totally different world. So. Yeah.
Would you think there are lots of similarities between you and Sophie?
No, not at all. In fact, in the sense that we both had vision loss, yes. Yeah. But it was an interesting sort of like emotional experiment for me, because when the stroke happened to me, I sort of took the path of, I started feeling very guilty and like a burden on people because I lost my job. I lost my driver's license. I had to relearn how to walk and do all kinds of things. And I felt very burdensome and bad and depressed. And I think Sophie takes the route of kind of more where it like hardened her, maybe a little bit angry, a little bit antsy to get back to being the level of independent that she was beforehand. Whereas I was a little more, for lack of a better word, like in kind of like a victim, oh, poor me. And I think Sophie is trying to get that independence back, but it winds up being very harsh because she's dealing with it in a human way. So,
what I love about the film, Sophie obviously has some vulnerabilities, but she finds a way to get through this and
bounces back pretty quick. Whenever there's a moment, she's kind of like, yeah.
Exactly. How was Tribeca last year? How was the Tribeca experience?
To be honest, it was virtual for me. They couldn't fly anybody out to go to it. So yeah. I did like we're doing right now on Zoom. I did a pre-recorded Q&A with Randall and Jessica and Kim. And that was all she wrote. that was all I did for Tribeca. So
yeah. You've done a lot of voice work, but what was it like segueing into a feature film?
I had done some on camera. That was actually why I came to LA. So it wasn't like a brand new concept. It wasn't like I went from doing voiceover to immediately feature film, zero experience. I had been doing on camera for a while, and this just happened to be the first, bigger thing. But it's very, very, very different. Especially physically demanding wise on camera, definitely much more so than voiceover. They're just different. I do them both for different reasons. They're both fun.
Okay. How long did this film take to film?
Well, depending, I mean, if you want to include all the COVID stuff, I actually went to Canada 3 different times. So the original, I flew out there right at the end of February 2020. So we started shooting in March 2020 and then got shut down after about 2.5, 3 weeks of shooting. Yeah. I went back in July and August of 2020, and then December 2020 into January 2021. But part of that time I had to quarantine for 2 weeks every time I went back. So there was like a month of that was literally me just sitting in a 1-bedroom apartment in Toronto, watching someone walk across the street with my coffee because I wasn't allowed to leave the building. They would deport you. There was a huge fine. And I was like, I'm staying in.
Yeah. So I was doing a little bit of research. So it was 2012 when you had your stroke?
Yes. And it's a combination of stroke and a condition that nobody's going to know called hemiplegic migraines. Okay. It affects like 0.1% of the pop. They're very, very strange, but the migraines they look like a stroke. Yeah. And they leave little cysts in the brain. And so I had them since I was 9 or 10. And so I was assuming, oh, this is another migraine. This sucks. I'm going to go home. I'm going to be in bed for 3 days. And then something was just different where I was like, something is wrong. Something is like more permanent. Something is happening. And that started me off on that whole situation where it was more than I bargained for.
So you were told by people, and I'm reading a quote that, you were told to learn braille and get a live-in assistant.
I was a very specific doctor. I can still see the room. She was handing me a pamphlet I lived in Wisconsin at the time, like the Madison Institute for the Blind or something. And it was to help people who had suffered vision loss. And I remember her saying, yeah, you're going to want to, rethink your plans, and you're going to want to learn braille and get a live-in assistant. I did neither. I guess maybe I am a little bit like Sophie. That was the only kind of like screw you moment that I ever had throughout like the doctors and whatever. But yeah, that was that. Modern medicine is a maze.
Yeah. So when was it that you started doing voice work?
I started doing it from when I was still sort of laying in bed. Like I had always wanted to do that since I was a little kid, like 7 or 8 years old. And I spent, after medical situations, I spent kind of what little I had left of my savings and built like a booth and a microphone setup around my bed. Okay. And I would record just little like tidbit commercials, little mobile games from my bed as best I could with what I could sort of see, which is extremely distorted. And then eventually, because I was just kind of like, I've lost everything. What the hell? I moved to Texas and I started working a lot I got my first agent there, and I started doing voiceover in studios. And I think most people didn't even know I was visually impaired. I didn't say anything because I was afraid it was going to cost me roles. Yeah. And I would just go in and really struggle through it. And I would have sessions, and it just sort of built from there. So I mean, as far as like building the booth around my bed, I don't remember what year that was, to be honest, but I started working for Funimation very sparsely right at the end of 2015 into 2016.
Okay. I was reading that you identify as non-binary. And
yes, sir.
you changed your legal name.
I did. I was born Catherine.
Okay.
People call me Katie. Yeah, I changed to Skylers as soon as I turned 18 and had surgery. So
okay, great. Well, I mean, can you talk about that decision to do that?
Yeah, that was definitely something that happened over time and was not something that I felt comfortable discussing as far as on camera was up until about like the last 2-3 years.
Okay.
I had always, even as just a little kid, I had never understood, especially getting into like middle and high school where it's more like, oh, male, female. I had always felt extremely uncomfortable in just identifying as female, being in a female body. And so I assumed, looking at stories around me, I was like, oh, that means I must be transgender. Okay, so we're going to go the transgender route. So I saw at the time the requirement to have top surgery, which is the mastectomy. You have to be in therapy for 2 years with some sort of gender therapy counselor. And so I did that. And I had the surgery, changed the name. It was one of the best things I've ever done. And then we got to discussing hormones. And I was like, this doesn't feel right. Like to me, like, this doesn't feel right. This isn't then I was really confused because I'm like, well, if you don't want to be a girl and you don't want to be a guy, now what do we do? Like, it was just a very strange. And then I was just sort of in this little amoeba phase for many years until I heard the term non-binary and asexual and this stuff like years later after I had moved. And I was like, oh, there's a name for it. So I understand that I look female to everyone, and that's fine. I'm not opposed to being called she, they, them, whatever you feel. But it was just, that was a long process of what is happening.
So you're living in Los Angeles now, correct?
Yes, this is correct.
Good. I mean, how would you say, has Hollywood gotten to the point right now where it's more comfortable in terms of gender diversity for performers, or where do you think Hollywood needs to go still?
I would say yes. I think like with anything, this goes for disability too. I think the gender is actually steaming a little bit further ahead than disability inclusion from what I've noticed, just come across my desk. I think it's 2 steps forward, 1 step back, and humans are making the effort to change, and that's all that matters. There's bumps, like it's not going to happen overnight, you know? So I would say people are doing their best, and that's all you can ask for. It gets a little weird because now it's kind of turned into this like flavor of the week where they're like, oh, we're casting, you know, non-binary, all of this and this and this. And like, it's almost like a checkbox it's gotten kind of like, not ingenuine, but I don't know. Some of the casting calls that I get are just like, just put out, I don't know. It's just weird. But I do think people are doing their very best, and there's a lot of good stories that are being told. So,
okay. All right. So do you have any future projects lined up?
I do. I can't talk about any of them because I've signed my soul away. So yeah, sorry about that.
That's okay, man. Well, congratulations on the film again. I watched it this week. I really enjoyed it. See For Me is available January 7th.
Sorry.
No. I'm glad it's available in theaters, digital, and video on demand. Skyler Davenport is the star. It's very thrilling. I liked it a lot. So thank you so much for talking to us tonight, and continued good luck.
Thank you. You too. Have a good one.
Thanks so much. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.